Hello and welcome to the International Daily Roundup with People's Dispatch, where we bring you some of the top stories from across the globe. Let's take a look at today's headlines. Following rejection at UN, Trump plans to extend embargo on Iran. Bolivian coup President Jeanine Áñez to withdraw candidacy in upcoming elections. Party of Socialism and Liberation activists arrested in Denver, Colorado. US administration asks federal prosecutors to use sedition charges on protesters. Trade unions in Uruguay strike over government lack of response to workers' woes. The Trump administration plans to issue an executive order following imposition of US sanctions on anyone who violates a conventional arms embargo against Iran. The decision comes after the US failed to activate snapback international sanctions against Iran in the United Nations Security Council. Reports suggest that an executive order will be issued within days, which will threaten secondary sanctions against countries or firms buying or selling arms to Iran. The US move is in anticipation of the expiration of the UN arms embargo on Iran in October. The arms embargo against Iran was imposed in 2007 by the UNSC Resolution 1747 and other subsequent resolutions over the allegations that Iran was trying to develop a nuclear weapon. After signing of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or the nuclear deal by Iran and other countries in 2015, the UNSC passed Resolution 2231, according to which the arms embargo will expire in October. The other signatories of the JCPOA were China, Russia, Germany, the UK, and France. The US is claiming that Iran violated the provisions of the JCPOA and hence the Resolution 2231. It claims that hence the arms embargo has to be reimposed. However, other signatories and the UNSC have rejected the US claims last month. Signatories of the JCPOA have stated that since the US has unilaterally withdrawn from the deal in May 2018, it has no standing on the matter. They have refused to support the US calls for snapback sanctions against Iran and have vowed to continue adhering to the provisions of the deal in a coordination meeting earlier this month. On Thursday, Bolivia's coup regime President Jeanine Áñez announced her decision to withdraw her candidacy for the upcoming October 18 presidential elections. The move is viewed as an attempt to unify votes against the MAS party of former President Evo Morales. A former conservative senator, Áñez took office after the coup that overthrew Evo Morales last year. Morales was forced into exile following an extreme right-wing assault on supporters of the MAS and their allies. Áñez's announcement came a day after a well-regarded opinion poll on voting intention placed her in fourth place in the presidential race with only 10.6% of the votes, far from being able to contest a second round. The same opinion poll carried out by a prominent right-wing think tank, the Jubilee Foundation, suggested that the frontrunner MAS's Luis Arce could win the upcoming elections in the first round with 40.3% of the votes. This poll is the largest consulted poll yet, covering both urban and rural areas of 225 municipalities. The same poll had right-wing candidates Carlos Mesa at 26.2% and Luis Fernando Camacho at 14.4%. By pulling out of the race, Áñez also expects the election to be pushed to a second round by consolidating the anti-Arce vote. To avoid a second round, the election winner requires at least 40% of valid votes in the first round and a 10-point advantage over the closest competitor. Responding to her withdrawal, Morales had raised concerns about her failed candidacy, allowing her to escape with impunity from the scandalous corruption cases she faced during her time in power, but also from the genocide in Sencata and Sacaba. 4 members of the Party for Socialism and Liberation in Denver, Colorado were arrested by law enforcement units yesterday, September 17th. The activists have been at the forefront of the mass anti-racist movement sparked by the violent murder of George Floyd on May 25th that has brought hundreds of thousands of people to the streets across the country to demand justice for victims of police violence and structural change to address racism. In the PSL statement on the arrest, they reported that member Russell Rutch was arrested while in the parking lot of a store. Some hours later, Lillian House was surrounded by 5 police cars while driving and arrested. Later on in the afternoon of September 17th, SWAT teams arrived at the home of Joel Northam and arrested him, and following that, Elisa Lucero was arrested. In addition to the carefully orchestrated and dramatic arrest, the 4 anti-racist organizers have been slapped with several serious felony charges and misdemeanors, including the kidnapping of 18 police officers and rioting, which all carry prison time. We speak to Eugene Puryear of the Party of Socialism and Liberation on this issue.
Eugene, could you first begin by talking about the context to the arrest itself and whether you've been able to get in touch with some of the activists who were arrested and what's happening on the legal scene right now?
Absolutely. So what took place was that yesterday morning, a number of, actually late last night and yesterday morning, late the night before and yesterday morning, there was a concerted effort by police in the area of Denver, Colorado, to single out a number of activists, 4 members of the PSL, leading members of the PSL, and it appears that perhaps some of our allies as well were also targeted, and we're still trying to get the full force of who may have been caught in this dragnet, but they were stopping people at work. One of the individuals, Joel Northam, actually had a SWAT team with an armored vehicle show up to his house to arrest him. Lillian House, another one of the activists who was arrested, was surrounded on the road by 5 police cars and taken in. So they were taken in a manner that made it seem like they were, multi-state criminals or something that had committed a string of armed robberies or whatever it may be, despite the fact that the charges that have been leveled against them are for peaceful protest. And so the context for this really is that over the past 2 months, there have been a range of protests around the murder of Elijah McClain by Denver Aurora Police, which is just outside of Denver. And the police have been massively embarrassed by this. There have been huge demonstrations, thousands of people, the taking over of a city council meeting at one point, and hours of very poignant testimony being given by the families of many police brutality victims in Denver and in the surrounding area. And so this seems to come really as retaliation for those protests and for that exposure of the police. And it was done in such a way, and the charges are such, inciting a riot, kidnapping. I mean, these are completely bogus charges, and we could talk more about it, but it seems entirely designed to create the maximum sense of fear, the maximum amount of demonization, and to really try to criminalize the protest movement, because these people are really the most identifiable, or at least some of the most identifiable leaders of this protest movement in the area. And to see them charged like this with these kind of charges and this kind of police response, it seems to us to be really 100% aimed at scaring people from coming out and continuing to protest and continuing to challenge the police. So far, we have not been able to. We've only had limited contact with a few people. They're being held, for people to just understand a little bit more. So there's the city of Denver, which people have heard about, and then there's some surrounding counties. And the charges come from at least one of the surrounding counties. We're still trying to figure it out because they're, not giving all the information out. And so the Denver police arrested people and said, well, we're holding them for another county, and then they have to come get them and they have to do something. So they're using a bureaucratic process to try to keep people certainly in jail and not able to get out on bond, and try to keep them incommunicado from us, their comrades, from their families, and from the broader public.
In the related story, the administration of President Donald Trump has directed federal prosecutors to aggressively pursue cases against protesters accused of violence. On Thursday, a memo emailed to federal attorneys by the U.S. Justice Department has instructed prosecutors to also make use of the rarely used criminal sedition charges against protesters when required. The memo was sent by the Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey A. Rosen. The email stated that both he and Attorney General William Barr agreed that the use of charges of seditious conspiracy was appropriate against the supposedly violent protesters. The memo comes a day after reports revealed a similar push by Barr, a Trump appointee. Rosen also goes ahead and tells attorneys that the application of USC Section 2384, which deals with sedition, does not require evidence of any purported plot against the state. He argued that the critics of this section are not aware of its broad scope and that it is proper to apply it on various acts challenging the federal government's authority. Section 2384 is a rarely used section of the US Criminal Code and carries a maximum prison sentence of 20 years. It was often reserved only for individuals or organizations involved in actively attempting to violently overthrow the government. The suggested expansion of what can be defined as sedition can be used against hundreds of citizens who clashed with federal law enforcement agencies in response to repressive tactics. According to reports, over 300 demonstrators have been charged with federal crimes during the course of the protests. Civil rights advocates have argued that many of these cases are either exaggerated claims by law enforcement agencies or completely trumped up. On Thursday, Uruguay's Single Central Union of Workers, the PIT-CNT, alongside other labor organizations, carried out a 24-hour strike across the country. The strike was held denouncing the lack of budget for social policies, policies against gender violence, and the fate of the disappeared. During a press conference from the headquarters of the union, its president Fernando Pereira remarked that the struggle is permanent, citing the lack of response from the state to thousands of workers who lost income due to the pandemic. Pereira stated that there is a loss of jobs and wages which remains unaddressed by the government and that the most vulnerable sectors of poverty are not served. The striking workers rejected the budget proposal put forward by the cabinet of President Luis Lacalle Pou, which points to a reduction in spending in several key sectors of the economy. Furthermore, the unions reject the urgent consideration law, which was enacted on the 10th of July. The law is widely considered the president's political program. The workers also demanded an increment in the budget allocated to housing, education, and health. Uruguay has shown the least investment in social programs to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic, according to a report published in July by the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. On August 27th, another strike was led by the State Officials Confederation, which represents public workers. The union opposed the government's decision to cut salaries as part of the budget plan. The workers demanded President Lacalle to abide by his electoral promise of not affecting the purchasing power of both private and public workers. And this is all we have for this episode of the International Daily Roundup. For more such stories and videos, visit our website peoplesdispatch.org, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Thank you for watching.
De pie cantar que vamos a triunfar, avanza ya.